biting wind howled like a banshee, clawing at the windows of the isolated cabin. Inside, huddled around the crackling fireplace, four friends, Emily, Ben, Sarah, and Jake, tried to ignore the eerie silence that had fallen upon the snowy landscape. They were supposed to be enjoying a relaxing winter getaway, but a freak blizzard had cut them off from the outside world, leaving them stranded in this remote corner of the wilderness. Emily, ever the optimist, tried to break the tense silence. "Come on guys, let's play a game. Charades? 20 questions?" No one responded. Ben, his face pale and drawn, stared intently at the swirling snow outside. Sarah, usually the life of the party, sat hunched over, her eyes wide with a fear she couldn't conceal. Jake, the youngest of the group, was shivering uncontrollably, his gaze fixed on the shadows dancing around the edges of the room. The power had gone out hours ago, plunging the cabin into an eerie darkness that only the flickering flames of the fireplace could pierce. The wind, relentless in its assault, rattled the windows, threatening to shatter them. Each gust brought with it a chilling sound, a mournful wail that seemed to emanate from deep within the woods. As the night wore on, the fear grew. The cabin, once a cozy refuge, now felt like a prison, a tomb. Every creak of the old wooden structure sent shivers down their spines. They huddled closer to the fire, their whispers barely audible above the howling wind. Then, they heard it. A scratching sound, faint at first, coming from the attic. They exchanged terrified glances. Emily, her voice trembling, suggested they investigate. "No way," Ben declared, his voice firm. "Whatever it is, it's better left undisturbed." But Sarah, her fear giving way to a strange sense of defiance, insisted on finding out. "We can't just sit here and wait for it to come down," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "We need to know what it is." Jake, emboldened by Sarah's courage, volunteered to go with her. Armed with a rusty axe and a flickering lantern, they cautiously climbed the creaking stairs. The attic was cold and dusty, the air thick with the scent of decay. Cobwebs clung to every surface, and shadows lurked in every corner. As they ventured deeper into the attic, the scratching sound grew louder. It seemed to be coming from a large, wooden chest tucked away in a far corner. With trembling hands, Sarah lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled amongst cobwebs and forgotten trinkets, lay a figure. A woman, frozen in time, her skin pale and translucent, her eyes wide with a look of terror. She wore a tattered Victorian gown, and a single, long, silver needle protruded from her chest. Sarah gasped, dropping the lid with a clatter. Jake, his face a mask of horror, stumbled backwards, bumping into a stack of old trunks. The trunks tumbled down, unleashing a torrent of dust and forgotten objects. One of the objects, a small, intricately carved wooden box, fell open, spilling its contents onto the floor. Inside, nestled amongst tarnished silver coins and faded photographs, was a single, long, silver needle. Suddenly, the woman in the chest began to move. Her eyes, fixed on Sarah, flickered open. A chilling scream escaped her lips, a sound that echoed through the cabin, shattering the silence. Below, Emily and Ben, startled by the scream, rushed upstairs. They found Sarah and Jake frozen in terror, staring at the reanimated woman in the chest. The woman, her movements jerky and unnatural, began to rise, her limbs contorted at unnatural angles. The needle protruding from her chest, now dripping with a viscous black liquid, seemed to be the source of her unnatural strength. She lunged toward Sarah, her icy fingers reaching out to grasp her throat. Jake, regaining his composure, swung the axe. It struck the woman with a sickening thud, but she barely flinched. The axe bounced off her, leaving only a shallow scratch. Desperate, Sarah grabbed the wooden box containing the needle and hurled it at the woman. The box struck her in the face, knocking her back. The woman, enraged, let out another blood-curdling scream and lunged again, this time aiming for Jake. Ben, seeing his friend in danger, leaped forward, tackling the woman to the ground. They tumbled to the floor, a chaotic struggle ensuing. The woman, fueled by a supernatural rage, fought with a ferocity that defied belief. Emily, realizing that they were no match for the creature, frantically searched for a way to stop it. Her eyes fell upon the fireplace. An idea, desperate and dangerous, formed in her mind. She grabbed a handful of dry kindling and shoved it into the fireplace. Then, she reached for the lantern, its flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. With a trembling hand, she aimed the lantern at the woman. The flames, licking at the lantern's glass, ignited the kindling. The fire roared to life, engulfing the woman in a sea of flames. She screamed, a sound of pure agony, as the fire consumed her. Her body, once rigid and lifeless, now contorted in a grotesque dance of pain. The air filled with the smell of burning flesh and hair. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the screaming stopped. The flame subsided, leaving behind only a pile of ashes and the acrid smell of smoke. Exhausted and traumatized, the friends descended the stairs, leaving the charred remains of the woman in the attic. The cabin, once filled with fear and dread, now felt strangely peaceful. But the peace was short-lived. As they huddled around the fireplace, trying to regain their composure, they heard a faint scratching sound coming from beneath the floorboards. A chilling realization dawned on them. The woman in the chest was not the only one. The floorboards began to heave and groan. A pair of skeletal hands, long and clawed, emerged from beneath the floor, followed by a grotesque face, its eyes burning with an unholy light. The friends exchanged terrified glances. They knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that their nightmare was far from over. The house, it seemed, was teeming with the undead, and they were trapped. As the creature emerged fully from beneath the floorboards, its body contorted and decaying, they knew that their fight for survival had just begun. The winter, once a promise of peace and tranquility, had transformed into a season of terror, a time when the dead walked among the living. And in the heart of the blizzard, trapped in a cabin overrun by the undead, they were utterly alone. The Whispering Blizzard. The small mountain town of Black Hollow lay nestled in a snow-laden valley, far removed from the bustling world beyond its frosty peaks. Winters were long and merciless, with temperatures plummeting so low that the air seemed to crackle with icy intent. For the townsfolk, this was simply the rhythm of life. But this winter was different. This winter carried a whisper, a chilling echo in the blizzard that none could explain. It began in early December, when the first heavy snowstorm of the season rolled in. The snow came thick and fast, blanketing the town in a shroud of white. At first, the residents welcomed it, stoking their fires and settling in for the season. But as the days turned to weeks, a peculiar unease crept into the hearts of Black Hollow's people. The first disappearance. On December 15th, young Ellie Carter vanished. She had gone sledding with her older brother, Jack, on the hill behind their house. Jack had turned his back for only a moment to adjust his scarf, but when he looked again, Ellie was gone. The snow around her sled was undisturbed, as if she had simply melted into the storm. The town organized a search party, their voices calling out into the howling wind. But the storm seemed to mock them, drowning their shouts in its icy roar. When they found no trace of Ellie, whispers began to spread. Whispers of an ancient curse, of something that lurked in the snow. The blizzard's voice. By Christmas Eve, the blizzard had become relentless. Snow piled high against the doors, and the wind screamed like a living thing. That night, Sheriff Tom Mathers sat alone in his office, nursing a cup of coffee. The power had gone out hours earlier, and the only light came from a flickering lantern on his desk. A faint sound reached his ears, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. He froze, straining to hear over the wind. The voice grew louder, forming words that sent a shiver down his spine. "Tom, come outside." Gripping his flashlight and revolver, he stepped into the storm. The snow swirled around him, a white abyss that seemed to close in from all sides. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Tom, we need you." He turned sharply, his flashlight beam cutting through the snow. For a brief moment, he thought he saw a figure, a shadowy form that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Panic rising, he stumbled back into the station, slamming the door behind him. He didn't sleep that night, and by morning, his hair had turned noticeably grayer. The cabin in the woods. By New Year's Day, 3 more residents had disappeared. The town was in a state of near hysteria. Stories of the whispering blizzard spread like wildfire, and many locked themselves indoors, refusing to venture out even for essentials. But not everyone succumbed to fear. Amelia Grant, a journalist from the city who had come to Black Hollow to cover the strange weather, decided to investigate. She was skeptical of the supernatural tales but couldn't deny the oddities surrounding the disappearances. Her research led her to an old, abandoned cabin deep in the woods, a place long whispered about in local folklore. According to the stories, the cabin had belonged to a recluse named Elias Griggs, who had vanished decades ago under mysterious circumstances. It was said that Elias had dabbled in dark rituals, attempting to summon spirits of the snow. Amelia's curiosity outweighed her fear. Armed with a camera, a flashlight, and a notebook, she set out for the cabin one afternoon, determined to uncover the truth. The discovery. The journey to the cabin was treacherous. The snow was knee-deep, and the trees loomed like skeletal sentinels. By the time Amelia reached the clearing where the cabin stood, the sun was beginning to set, casting an eerie orange glow over the landscape. The cabin was a decrepit structure, its roof sagging under the weight of the snow. The windows were dark, but as Amelia approached, she thought she saw movement inside. Swallowing her apprehension, she pushed open the creaking door. The interior was frigid and smelled of decay. Snow had drifted in through broken windows, covering the floor in a thin layer of white. In the center of the room stood a wooden table, upon which lay a dusty book bound in cracked leather. Amelia opened the book, her breath fogging in the cold air. The pages were filled with strange symbols and handwritten notes in a language she didn't recognize. One passage, however, was written in English. "The snow listens. The snow watches. Beware the voice in the storm, for it is not of this world." A sudden noise made her spin around. The door had slammed shut, and the whispering had begun. The entity. The whispers grew louder, surrounding Amelia in a cacophony of unintelligible voices. She backed against the wall, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The air grew colder, and frost began to creep up the walls. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and gaunt, its body seemingly made of snow and ice. Its eyes were dark voids, and its mouth moved in sync with the whispers. "Why have you come?" it asked, its voice like the grinding of glaciers. Amelia couldn't speak. She could only stare as the entity advanced. It raised a skeletal hand, and the room filled with a blinding white light. The aftermath. When Amelia awoke, she was lying in the snow outside the cabin. Her camera and notebook were gone, and the book had vanished. Staggering to her feet, she made her way back to town, her mind racing with what she had seen. She tried to tell the townsfolk, but they dismissed her as delirious from the cold. Only Sheriff Mathers seemed to believe her, his haunted eyes meeting hers with understanding. In the weeks that followed, the blizzard finally began to wane. The disappearances stopped, and the town slowly returned to normal. But Amelia knew the truth. The whispering blizzard wasn't gone, it was merely waiting, watching, biding its time. Epilogue. Years later, long after Amelia had left Black Hollow, another brutal winter descended upon the town. And with it came the whispers, carried on the icy wind. The people of Black Hollow locked their doors and stoked their fires, praying they wouldn't hear their names called from the storm. Far away, in a city apartment, Amelia sat by her window, staring at the falling snow. She could still hear the whispers in her dreams, could still feel the cold embrace of the entity. She knew it would come for her eventually. And when it did, she would be ready.